Hello and welcome once again. In this class, we will be discussing Tafsir of the Qur'an. What is the meaning of Tafsir? Firstly, Tafsir is gotten from the root word fassara, which means to explain or to explicate. Literally, Tafsir means explanation, and technically, Tafsir is the explanation or the interpretation of the meaning of the Quran with full detail. Full detail, including the circumstance of the revelation of the Quran, that is, the causes of revelation of a particular portion of the Quran, time of revelation of the Quran, the interpretation and application of the Quran as well. Tafsir is also known as commentary or exegesis of the Quran. What then is the importance of the tafsir? Number one, tafsir helps one to fully understand the meaning of various verses of the Quran and their applications. Two, the different interpretations and meanings are studied under tafsir. Thirdly, tafsir provides deeper explanations of the text available using tools like language, the cultural heritage of the people, etc. In addition, the confusion and misunderstanding of the intended meaning of the Quran are eliminated through tafsir. For the verses that are open to multiple interpretations, tafsir is used to clarify the ambiguity in such verses. Example of such verses is that which Allah said, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim, which means Allah's hands is above their hands. This was at the point when the people were pledging their allegiance to the Prophet. Now, if Allah says He has hands, are the hands like that of men or any other being? So, the tafsir is used to clarify such ambiguities. Tafsir is also used to teach the circumstances and immediate causes of a revelation of the Quran, that is, the events that surrounds the revelation of the Quran. And this will take us to types of tafsir. We have two types of tafsir. And number one is tafsir bi-riwaya. In this type of tafsir, the verses of the Quran are explained from different transmission sources, such as the Quran, the Hadith, and such that were made by the companions of the Prophet. That is to say, there are some verses of the Quran that further explains some other portions of the Quran, and there are some made by the Prophet himself, and later on, the explanation made by the companions of the Prophet after his death. All of these fall under tafsir bi-riwaya, that is, tafsir made by transmission of knowledge. And the second one is known as tafsir bi-ra'ay. This is a tafsir done by the use of reasoning, or what is called ijtihad. It has to do with the comparison of verses, the traditions of the Prophet, and sayings of the companions of the Prophet to come up with the explanation of a particular portion of the Quran, relating it to the current situation or the contemporary event. It is important to note that tafsir bi-ra'ay must not contradict any tafsir made by riwaya. That is to say, that tafsir bi-ra'ay must not be an assumption of the one who is translating it. Rather, it must be focused on what corresponds with tafsir bi-riwaya. Even though the Quran was revealed in Arabic language to the Arabs themselves, why then do they need the explanation of the Quran? In the first instance, there are some expressions contained in the Quran which were not known during the pre-Islamic era. And secondly, there are some expressions used in the Quran which were known by the Arabs but now have different meaning from what the Arabs known it for. An example of such word is zakat. Zakat, before the advent of Islam, used to be used by farmers in the farm. to mean growing. But at the advent of Islam, zakat is used to mean purification of one's money. And this forms the basis of the origin of tafsir. And because Prophet Muhammad was the one through which the Quran was sent, he was charged with the responsibility of explaining the meaning of the Quran to the companions. And at his death, some companions took over the responsibility of explaining the Quran to others. The companions explained the Quran on the basis of what they heard from the prophets, passing this explanation orally from generation to generation. Some of his companions were Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ubay ibn Ka'ab, and a host of others. The generation that followed that of the companions of the prophets were known as the Tabi'un, that is, the followers of the companions of the prophet. They also explained the Quran using what they heard from the companions of the prophet, and this will take us to the development of tafsir. Some scholars among the Tabi'un traveled wide from one place to another in search of tafsir of the Quran. These scholars also made use of their knowledge of the Arabic grammar, philosophy, logic in interpreting the Quran, thereby compiling their search into a book form. Some of their works are JAMB Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran by Ibn Ja'far al-Tabari, Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim by Ismail bin Amir bin Kathir, الدر المنثور في تفسير المنثور by Jalaluddin As-Suyuti. After this set of commentators were the modern tafsir writers. Some of them were Sayyid Qutb, Muhammad Rashid Rida, Abu al-A'la Maududi. These scholars related their work on tafsir to the modern world, thereby discussing philosophy, sciences, geography, and many other fields of knowledge in their works. All the earlier works on tafsir were written in Arabic, and because of that, the usefulness of their works was limited to the Arabs alone. And because the Quran is not restricted to the Arabs alone, some scholars took the responsibility of translating the Quran into various languages such as English, Yoruba, Hausa, Urdu, and many other languages. Some of the scholars were Yusuf Ali, who named his work as The Meaning of the Glorious Quran. Another scholar was Muhammad Mamaduk Piktol, who wrote Translation of the Quran. Another translation work of the meaning of the Quran was Translation and Commentary of the Quran, written by Muhammad Asad. Another one was the Arabic text, English translation and commentary, written by Maulana Muhammad Ali. All these translated works were written in English language. Our next discussion in this lesson will be focused on Tajweed. What then is Tajweed? Tajweed is a verbal noun. By verbal noun, we mean a noun that is derived from a verb. Tajweed therefore is derived from the word jawwada, and jawwada means to embellish, to beautify, to decorate. It could also mean to carry out an act in the best way possible. Tajweed al-Quran therefore is the art of reading the Quran in the most appropriate manner, while Tajweed is the field of knowledge that deals with the teaching of the rules and regulations guiding the recitation of the Quran. It is important to know the difference between Tajweed and Tajweed al-Quran. While Tajweed is the knowledge dealing with the rules and regulations of the Quran, Tajweed al-Quran is the application of the rules when reading the Quran. There are reasons why you must apply the rules of Tajweed when reciting the Quran, and this will take us to the significance of Tajweed. Whenever you are reading the Quran and you apply the rules of Tajweed, it gives you the conviction of reciting correctly. Applying the rules of Tajweed also enables you to pronounce the letters of the Quran correctly. Whenever you recite the Quran applying the rules of Tajweed, you attract great rewards because Allah loves and is well pleased with whoever beautifies the Quran. And lastly, the application of the rules of Tajweed will prevent you from making errors in the recitation of the Quran. Number one of these rules is commencement of recitation of the Quran. At the commencement of recitation of the Quran, we have what we call isti'adha, which is the saying of A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. We also have basmala, which is the saying of Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, then the surah itself. And surah here means chapter, which is to be recited. There are 4 methods which can be used at the commencement of reciting the Quran, and any of these 4 methods can be used. Number 1 is separation of the 3 parts mentioned above. An example of such is saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim with one breath. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim with another breath. Qul huwallahu ahad with another breath. Now you would see that I have separated the 3 parts. The second method is by separating the first, then joining the second and the third together. An example of such is saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. You will see I separated the isti'aza from the remaining 2 with different breath. Then the third method is joining the first with the second and separating the third. That is to say, for example, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Reciting the first part and the second part together with one breath. Then, Qul huwallahu ahad with another breath. That is the third method you can use. And the fourth method is joining all. An example of such is saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. You will see the 3 parts are read with the same breath. So in essence, by joining or separating any of the parts has to do with the stoppage of your breath or the continuing of your breath. Another rule of Tajweed guiding the recitation of the Quran is the rule of Nun Sakina and Tanween. And I say Nun Sakina, it means Nun that has Sukun. And Tanween are the signs Fatihatain, Kaswatain, and Dumatain. The first rule under this segment is what we call Al-Izhar, which means manifestation. 6 letters among the Quranic letters fall under this category, and they are Hamza, Ha, Kha, Ainun, Ghainun, Ha. And this rule is applicable whenever you find Nun Sakina or Tanween together with any of the above mentioned letters following it immediately. When such happens, all you have to do is to make manifest Nun Sakina. And the second one is Al-Idgham, which is assimilation. This is done whenever you find Nun Sakina or Tanween and you find any of the following 6 letters after it. And these 6 letters are Ya, Ra, Mim, Lam, Waw, and Nun. If you find any of these 6 letters following Nun Sakina or Tanween immediately, what you do there is called assimilation, known as idgham in the Arabic language. And we have 2 types of idgham. We have the nasalized one, that is the one you pronounce adding your nasal sound. And this can be done when you find Yaw, Mim, Nun, and Waw following Nun Sakina or Tanween. An example of that is Mimma. Mimma, the application of nasal sound. And the second one is non-nasalized, known as al-idghamu bighayri gunna. And this would be done when you find Nono Sakina or Tenwin and you find any of the remaining two letters, that is Lam or Ra, following Nono Sakina or Tenwin. An example of such is Walam yakullahu yakulla kulla. At that point there is a nun, but the nun is assimilated into the lam. The next rule under this segment is what is known as al-iqla, which means conversion. Here we have to convert nun sakina or tenwin into mim whenever you find either of them preceding the Quranic letter ba. An example of such is mim ba'adi, mimba, mba. There, mim sound appears, whereas it is nun we find there. Then the last one is al-ikhfa. Al-ikhfa means hiding. Under the three divisions of the rules guiding Nun Sakina and Tenwin, we have listed about 13 letters. So the remaining letters of the Quran falls under this division. That is to say, whenever you find any of the remaining letters not mentioned above, after Nun Sakina or Tenwin, all we are going to do here is to hide the Nun Sakina or Tenwin whenever it precedes any of those letters. The ikhfa letters are 15 in number, and they are ta, tha, jim, dal, zal, zai, sin, shin, sod, dod, o, dho, fa, qaf, kaf. The application of ikhfa is similar to pronouncing the n sound that is in confab, contact, bondu, etc. And this will take us to the next rules of tajweed guiding the Quranic recitation. And this is mim sakina. And mim sakina, simply put, is when mim has sukun. So this is divided into three. We have what we call al-idgham al-shafawi, which means labial assimilation. When do you apply this rule known as labial assimilation? You apply this rule whenever mim sakina, that is a vowelless mim, is followed immediately by a vowelized mim. That is mim sakina with any mim that has vowel. That is when this rule is applied. And an example of that is الذي أطعمهم من hummi. At this instance, there is a vowelless meme. That is the first one. Then a vowelized meme follows it. That is why it is assimilated into each other. And because this assimilation takes place on the lips, that is the two lips coming together, that is why it is known as the labial assimilation. The second rule under mim sakina is what is known as al-ikhfa shafawi, and this in English means labial hiding. You apply this rule whenever mim sakina, that is a vowelless mim, is followed immediately by a vowelized letter ba. An example of such is where you have wahum bil akhirah. That hum bi. There we have a vowelless mim. Then immediately we find ba after it. So that is called labial hiding. And because it takes place on the lips, that is why it is called labial hiding. And the last one under mim sakina is what is known as al-idharu shafawi, and that is labial manifestation, because this is done on the lips as well. That is why it is called labial manifestation. Apply this rule whenever any of the Quranic letters different from mim and ba that is mentioned above follows mim sakina in the Quran. That is the only time you apply this rule. An example of such is wahum ala hum a, that is mim sakina, vowelless mim, and I ala. With this mention, we come to the end of this class. In summary, we have been able to discuss tafsir of the Quran Likewise, the importance of the Quran. We also looked at the types of tafsir that we have, the origin of tafsir, development of tafsir as well. We also look at the translation of the Quran into English and other languages. We also discussed the meaning of tajweed, difference between ilm al-tajweed and tajweed al-Quran, the significance of tajweed, rules governing Quranic recitation, ranging from commencing the Quran, rules of nun sakina and tanween, which are four. These are izhar, idgham, iqlab, and ikhfa. And lastly, we looked at rules guiding meme sakina, which is the vowelless meme, which are labial assimilation known as al-idgham al-shafawi, labial hiding known as al-ikhfa al-shafawi, and labial manifestation known as al-idhar al-shafawi. See you in the next class.